they have an extra car Marshall's parking lot, but not the same way across the street. Even though we're actually saying we had this area go which is very exciting finally. And we were thinking that we turned right on red and didn't realize that the crosswalk turns on right when you get the green light out of City Hall, Town Hall. And so I put a letter to Ray Summer saying, hey, the walkers should have green. They shouldn't turn green at the same time. So T-Bone, you're like right looking a walker, has a watch sign,
I don't live like that.
Oh, you're good. Thanks.
I want out. Don't get me in there.
This is for the Chamber of Commerce. It's nothing official.
16 seconds.
Oh yeah, here too, up here too, for us to get across from, neighborhood to Big Y over here. Marshalls and
Wide sidewalks.
putting in that, trying to put in what is spot Well, there's that shit. There was that great oh, I mean, what he did was wrong all over.
This one's like 2 years ago. So there was more.
So nice to, I know it may not be directly, especially
So I think about that.
That's because it's all put in front of
Yeah, so right now we're not
get to that, like 3-4 miles away, side.
kind of all grassy and stuff.
Yeah, there's the grass.
Because that's maintained by the property.
And title. Right, right.
So what you're saying is you guys would help, given the projects go through the area, and fall back into Oregon together.
We would fall back on the town, typically anything that we provide, but then the town might work with the property owners and say, hey, can you or will you or DOT consider taking parking spaces and my personal opinion is lazy parking. I would love to see that happen in the next game. Free camping as well. Parking spaces are so really something it's been
We can acquire property for roadway.
Oh, yeah, it's all the way, oh, yeah, it goes all the way down there.
Department
And
store.
then there's a cut through across the beach so you can get right over to like the gastro store. Right from there. Yeah, Jen did. That's right. It's beautiful. I mean, what they did is beautiful. And you know what? Because you know darn well, speeds on that road goes down. Because it's much narrower. They're set further back from the road, you know what I mean? And they have this beautiful walkway now that gets you like all, I mean, you know, oh, absolutely. You know, I've been to their house gardens.
Which actually does bring into question the safety for not even just I had someone who was basically straight up now. I had a client who was arrested over here. Just to be no, oh my gosh. It's even, I mean, either way it's bad. But as far as I made the decision to stop it. I noticed now it's
yeah, we try and stick the needle. Pairs are out. They've gone forever. They recently added there's an hour repair officially sell it.
I just recovered off one bad, like a side swing. Oh, that's really good to see because I'll be saying, yeah, true. It's like tough.
Hello.
These were made segments
Thank you.
I don't have an issue with it. Because I'm saying, South creating this two-lane thing is become a single lane. Same thing coming to the car. We go all 2 lanes. Taking that opportunity to pass 2 or 3 cars. Why do we need to go to 2 lanes in the most populated, busiest areas? You know? And if you go south, the same thing. Just south of I'm on the pedestrian. They told me I've been trying to figure out who was the person.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's important. So in highway design, they tell you to
I've been setting
in the house and take those conversations, or you just using your own common sense. That's a good one. I always take notes on like right hand guys. It's like, yeah, we're asking making all sorts of good comments.
I like it. I think it'd be nice. Whoever owns all this. Sure. But especially this one way though, I can bike it, so I wonder which way is the space out here. Yeah, I was surprised that you're now retired. How hard. Because we're taking right now, it's a project. So we don't have any progress. Let's see what is which way is which. This is all one way. So it's the other way, or all the way around. Yeah.
I know. While we take it out what's there now. Start from scratch, anything close to these that are
If it was a hazard to the roadway, you know, maybe remove it, but not yeah, you can almost see the styles with this one.
The whole intersection.
Yeah, the intersection is dark. No, that's right. Yeah, no, that's why we have no way to yeah, no, I like it. Not so much width. Yeah. mind if I take your name down?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a landscape architect too. John. Yeah. I work with Sue and I'm at Weston Sam's. Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm on the neighborhood association. So Jason was here earlier. So we've had a couple meetings with DOT over there.
Okay, everyone. I can just get your attention. We're going to start the formal presentation now. So just wrap up the conversations, grab a seat, and let's get to the presentation.
Thanks for coming out this evening, everybody, to tonight's presentation for State Project 155-176, intersection improvements at Bishop's Corner. Excuse the adjustment here. Okay. So my name is Andrew Esposito. I'm the project engineer for this job. With me tonight, I have the project manager, Joe Arsenal, the project designer, Nick Willey, from our rights-of-way department, Matt Janatopoulos, from our traffic department, I have Colin Bomber, Adler Phils, and Jinhao He, and from our landscape design unit, I have Matt Berry back there as well. Maybe get an opportunity to talk with us all before this presentation, and we'll also have time to talk after the presentation as well. Before I dive into the project presentation, get into the background and the proposed improvements, just want to touch on the Connecticut Department of Transportation's Title VI Notice to the Public. The information you see on the screen is available in handouts in the back. We also have all this information available on our project website. The handouts have information on how to get to our project website, and I'll leave that information up on the screen again at the end of the presentation. So, project location, we're at Bishop's Corner, the intersection of Route 44, Route 218, and North Main Street. So North Main Street, south of the intersection, is a local road. You can also see Haynes Road that intersects North Main Street to the south, Flag Road and Skyview Drive that intersect Route 44, and Starkle, which intersects 44 and wraps around to 218. This area is obviously very well developed. 3 of the 4 corners of the intersection have gas stations on them, highlighted here in green. The buildings highlighted in purple are all the commercial and retail space with all the parking surrounding them. Each leg of the intersection has a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour and an average daily traffic between 20,000 and 25,000 vehicles per day. So this is the existing lane configuration at the intersection. Each leg of the intersection has 2 through lanes, a dedicated left turn lane, and these channelized right turn lanes. Because we have these channelized right turn lanes, we have all these islands outlined here in red, which are a pretty big component for improving safety at this intersection. Vehicles who use the channelized rights tend to use them at high speeds, with their main focus being looking at the upstream traffic or upstream vehicles that they need to yield to, which may leave pedestrians waiting to cross to or from these islands unnoticed. So the signal at the intersection has a concurrent pedestrian crossing phase, and all that means is pedestrians when they get their signal to cross, it's in the same direction and at the same time as vehicles traveling through the intersection. The push button to activate all of these signals are all located within these pedestrian islands. This kind of creates a lengthy multi-step crossing to get from one side of the road to the other. The town has received complaints from pedestrians who use the intersection saying it's difficult and confusing, and vehicles often don't yield to them as they try to cross to these pedestrian islands. They've also complained about the condition of the islands. Pedestrians must wait on them surrounded by vehicles until they get their signal to walk. These islands are subject to get hit by large turning vehicles. Not all the ramps are ADA compliant, and 2 of the 4 islands are mostly made up of asphalt, kind of causing them to blend in with the surrounding roadway. So this was our original alternative concept and project limits for removing the channelized right turn lanes, with the goal being to improve pedestrian and intersection operations. By removing these pedestrian islands, we were able to normalize and shorten the total pedestrian crossing from one side of the road to the other. We were also, by removing these channelized rights on the southbound leg and the westbound leg, we are replacing the channelized rights with dedicated right turn lanes. On the northbound leg and the westbound leg, we were able to eliminate the channelized right turn lanes and combine those right turn movements with the through movements. We presented this alternative at a public informational meeting in July of 2023. The proposed improvements were pretty well received, but we did receive a lot of comments about the lack of bike facilities throughout the project limits. And along with that, a lot of feedback discussing removing vehicle lanes in order to make room for more bike lanes or some type of bike facility. This ultimately led us to go back to analyze more design alternatives to see if we could fit some type of bike lane while still improving the pedestrian and intersection operations at the site. So the first thing we had to do was look at a bunch of the constraints within the area. It's built up. We have a lot of roadside objects right outside our roadway cross-section, like utility poles, signs, lampposts, and trees that we would need to contend with. There's a lot of parking spaces out there. We don't want to lose or change any parking spaces without the proper mitigation. We also don't want to put any of the adjacent properties out of compliance with any local zoning ordinances. And as I mentioned before, we've got a lot of feedback about reducing the number of travel lanes. Given that each leg of this intersection sees between 20,000 and 25,000 vehicles per day, reducing the number of travel lanes out there anymore now is not a design alternative we can really recommend. However, our traffic unit did analyze a few different alternatives for what a lane reduction would look like. So the proposed layout on the left here shows the lane configuration I went over in the previous slide, where we removed the pedestrian islands, and for this eastbound and southbound leg, we replaced those channelized right turn lanes with dedicated right lanes. And for the northbound and the westbound, we eliminated the channelized right turn lanes, and we're able to combine those right turning movements with one of the through movements. Of all the alternatives traffic analyzed for reducing vehicle lanes beyond that, this was the alternative build option 2 that produced the most efficient design in terms of congestion and delay. But it's still a 286% increase in delay time compared to our proposed layout. So this graphic here shows how far back vehicles would get backed up while waiting at the intersection. The green line is that our proposed layout that I showed on the previous slide, and the red lines here show that build option 2 with that 286% increase in delay time. Delay time is certainly something we try to avoid at all intersection design projects, but what's more concerning with the build option 2 is that these legs back up into these next intersections downstream, which is a pretty significant decrease in safety and something that we're really trying to avoid. So moving forward with the build at option 2 is not something we planned to do, and we looked at using our proposed alternative to try to incorporate some type of bike facility for this project. So the next thing we looked at was trying to fit them in our shoulders out there. This map is kind of a heat map that shows the varying shoulder widths throughout the project limits. Red, orange, yellow is signifying that 0 to 2 foot shoulder width. For this roadway classification, we would typically like to see 4 to 8 foot shoulders out here. Given the site constraints, 4 foot shoulders throughout the project limits is not something we're going to be able to achieve. So when you see kind of in red, orange, we're proposing to have at least a minimum 1 foot wide shoulder throughout there. So we're certainly not going to be able to fit a bike lane in that. So we looked at eating into sidewalk width. We do have pretty wide sidewalks out there today, mostly in the 4 to 7 foot range, even approaching 8 feet in a lot of areas. The problem with the sidewalk is there are a lot of objects in the sidewalk, kind of reducing that effective width of the sidewalk. So these are street level photos that are pretty representative of what you see on the sidewalk throughout the project limits. These top 2 photos show utility poles in the sidewalk, signs in the sidewalk, and you have lampposts and trees directly off the back of the sidewalk. This bottom right photo is showing a lamppost in the sidewalk, along with these 2 signs partially straddling the sidewalk, taking what's a pretty wide sidewalk and really reducing that usable space. So if we were to utilize this area, we would need to relocate or remove these roadside objects so that they can still serve their purpose, but again, we would be able to utilize that space. So when we looked at all these different alternatives, we laid out a lot of different designs to incorporate some type of bike facility, but to best meet the needs of pedestrians and cyclists in the area while having a minimal parking and right-of-way impacts. We are proposing to take the existing sidewalk, convert it into an 8 foot side path that we would delineate half for bikes and half for pedestrians. And that's the design that Nick is going to walk through.
So as Andrew just mentioned, the proposed design that we're at for this intersection for the off-street facilities will be a 2 foot buffer along with an 8 foot side path. As you can see up here, 4 feet of the side path will be delineated as a pedestrian lane, so basically just a sidewalk, and 4 feet of the side path will be delineated for a bike lane. Now walking through typical cross sections of North Main Street and Route 44. First for North Main Street, we will have 11 foot travel lanes, 10 foot turn lanes, 1 foot minimum shoulders, and then for the off-street facilities, we will have, again, the 2 foot buffer along with the 8 foot side path. One note about the buffer in the side path is that it will be elevated above the roadway grade, so that's just to offer maximum separation between pedestrians and the heavy volumes of vehicular traffic at the intersection. Another note here for North Main Street is that anytime that there is parking, as seen over here, there will be some type of buffer between the back of the side path, so here, and the start of the parking. This is just to offer protection from overhanging vehicles over into the side path to maintain the 8 foot width of the side path. We have more of the same on Route 44. Again, we have 11 foot travel lanes, 10 foot turn lanes, and then 1 foot minimum shoulders, and then again, the off-street facilities are a 2 foot buffer with an 8 foot side path that is, again, raised above the roadway. And then if there is parking, there will be some type of buffer or shield between the back of the side path and said parking. Now for the typical side path treatment, or kind of how we envision the side path to look, and you can see over here in the front, that's kind of what we're envisioning it to look like, but this is more of a, I guess, realistic view. So first for the side path itself, it will be made out of concrete, and it will be split into a pedestrian and bike lane using paint and pavement markings as seen here with these lines. The pedestrian lane will also have painted pedestrian markings that will be bidirectional, and the bike lane will also have painted bike markings that will be unidirectional, so the bike lanes will only be one way. As for the buffer, it will be a different material that is rougher and more texturized. This is just to deter bicyclists from riding on or near the buffer. This is just to keep them as far away from the road as possible to increase pedestrian safety here. For the corner treatments, we have two types of corners on the intersection. First being like the top left and bottom right. We have one sidewalk ramp here that ramps the side path down to the roadway grade where two intersecting crosswalks meet the sidewalk ramp. The only, for the bottom left and top right corners, the only difference here is the crosswalks do not intersect, so we have two separate sidewalk ramps that ramp the side path elevation down to the crosswalks and the roadway. For drainage, these turquoise markings as shown here are catch basins that we have initially laid out. This is a very preliminary design. We haven't done a full drainage analysis yet, but we will be running, we know that there are existing problems with drainage at the intersection, especially at, at this corner here, where it floods a lot. So we will be running a full drainage analysis on the existing system and making upgrades where needed based on that analysis. So drainage improvements will be incorporated in this project as well. For the lane configuration, I know Andrew got into it a little bit earlier, but this is the existing lane configuration where we have on all approaches a dedicated left turn lane, two dedicated through lanes, and then a dedicated right lane that also acts as a channelized right lane. And for the proposed lane configuration, we have for the southbound approaches and the southbound and eastbound approaches, we have a dedicated left turn lane, as seen here, two dedicated through lanes, and then a dedicated right lane. These dedicated right turn lanes will not be channelized. And for the northbound approaches, the northbound and the westbound approaches will have a dedicated left turn lane, a dedicated through lane, and then a combined through and right turn lane. And this is just one lane less than what the current configuration is, as the dedicated right through lane and one of the dedicated right turn lane and one of the through lanes were combined. So it reduces from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. And this does not increase delay for traffic significantly, so that was something we were able to do here. For the proposed crosswalks, I first want to just give some context on the slide. These red markings represent the existing pedestrian refuge islands that are out there today, and then they're overlaid over the proposed layout here in the background. So I just want to walk through an existing crossing path versus a proposed crossing path, and I'll do that for the crossing paths across the south leg of the intersection. So in an existing crossing path, the pedestrian would start in the existing sidewalk, cross the channelized right turn lane into the pedestrian refuge island. This is an unsignalized crossing, and then the pedestrian would hit the pedestrian push button, wait for the walk signal, and then cross all the way to the other side, the other pedestrian refuge island, where they would then have to wait to cross another channelized right turn lane, which is again another unsignalized crossing. And this total crossing distance amounts to 145 feet, which is pretty lengthy, and it's also a multi-step crossing path. And this is one of the main reasons that the project was actually initiated. These multi-step crossings are pretty dangerous for pedestrians, especially considering that 2 of the 3 crossings are unsignalized, especially in a location where drivers aren't really yielding to pedestrians and are just focused about finding a gap in traffic. So the main idea for this project was to normalize these crossings into one crossing movement, and that's exactly what we've done. So for the proposed crossing path, the pedestrian would simply just hit the pedestrian push button, which is located right behind the side path, and then they would simply cross in one crossing maneuver all the way across to the other side of the road. And this total crossing distance amounts to only 93 feet of crossing distance, which is a 52-foot reduction. And now for all of the other legs, each existing crossing path compared to its corresponding proposed crossing path is at least 38 feet longer in total crossing distance, which again is significantly larger than the proposed alternative. And with the decrease in crossing distance comes an increase in pedestrian safety. So again, that's one of the main reasons that this project is actually going on. As for the signal phasing, I know Andrew talked about it a little bit earlier, but we will be doing concurrent phasing here at the intersection. And essentially all that means is that whenever cars have a green light, any crosswalks that are parallel to the cars moving through the intersection will have a walk signal activated for a pedestrian at the same time that the light is green. We are adding some safety measures to go along with the concurrent phasing at the intersection, and these are what we like to call, I guess, yield to pedestrian signs, which are shown up here, where anytime there is a pedestrian walk signal activated, these signs will light up, and it's just telling turning vehicles to yield to pedestrians that will be in the crosswalk. Another added safety measure that we are including here at the intersection are LPIs, or lead pedestrian intervals. Essentially what LPIs do is give pedestrians a head start in the phasing, so the pedestrian will get their walk signal a few seconds before the concurrent cars get their green light. So what that kind of looks like is like in this animation that I'm showing here. So first, the pedestrian will get their walk signal, they will start walking, and then a few seconds later, the cars will get their green light. And since the pedestrian has established their presence in the crosswalk, the cars are more able to see them and hopefully be able to yield to them better. Yeah, so just another safety measure that we're adding along here with the concurrent phasing. For the project limits, first, for the north leg of the intersection, we are extending the side paths and the project limits up to the driveway at Big Y on the northbound side of Route 218. For the east leg of the project, we are extending the project limits all the way out to Skyview Drive, as shown here. For the south leg of the intersection, we are bringing the project limits and the side paths. We are currently proposing them to end just south of the intersection on North Main Street. We have considered extending these side paths all the way down to Haynes Road to connect into the bike lane system on North Main Street that starts at Haynes Road, like shown here. However, we are unsure if we can do that at this time. The off-street width in this segment of North Main Street here between our project limits and Haynes Road is only 12 to 13 feet wide, and in order for us to fit our cross-section in this space, we need our 8-foot buffer, or our 8-foot side path and a 2-foot buffer, which is 10 feet, plus a 4-foot landscape buffer that is required for the town on these properties over here. So we have reached out to the town and have not heard back yet if we can eat into those buffers. And if we can eat into those buffers, then we will heavily consider extending the bike lanes all the way down to Haynes Road to tie into this existing bike lane system here. And finally, for the west leg of the intersection, we are extending the side paths all the way out to the intersection of Route 44 and Flagler Road. However, we are extending the project limits even further west than that, just west to just west of Woodbury Lane, so that we can incorporate this big median here into the project. I will get into that a little bit later too. I know you can't really see this very well, but this is the bicycle network map of West Hartford that just shows the existing and proposed bike facilities in the town of West Hartford. And these facilities, or this map, helped us determine logical endpoints for the side path and where we wanted to tie our bike facilities into the existing network. So, first, for the west leg of the intersection, our idea was to tie into the Flag Road Sharrow system, as represented by this yellow line here. And first, for those of you who don't know, a sharrow is just a pavement marking that you find on a roadway with a bike and 2 carrots over the top. And all it means is that bicyclists are able to share the lane or the road with drivers, and it's just alerting drivers to this fact. So for tying into the Sharrow system, first for entering our side path from the existing Sharrow system at Flag Road, bicyclists would start in Flag Road and head eastbound, and then they would continue across the intersection of Route 44 and Flag, and then ramp up into the side path And then they have two options from there. They may continue straight down towards the intersection, or they could take a left, cross the bike crosswalk, and enter the Staples Plaza if they so please. Another extra added note here is that bicyclists that are approaching the intersection of Route 44 and Flag from Route 44, like here, may also enter the side path the same way by using this bike ramp, or they may use cross the intersection and enter the side path using this bike ramp here as well. For exiting the side path from the west leg of the intersection, bicyclists would be on the northbound side of Route 44, heading westbound. In order to tie into the Flag Road Share system, they would actually have to take a left and cross the bike crosswalk onto the other side of the road side path, and then they would simply just ramp back down into the intersection of Route 44 and Flag, and then continue westbound down the Share system that exists on Flag currently.
Your map doesn't show Woodbury on there. I said your map doesn't show Woodbury on here.
Oh, back here? Yeah, Woodbury is a little bit further down. It's at the end of the median, like past this down here. So it's just a little bit further down. It's not shown on this map. Yeah. So for the east leg of the intersection, the idea here was to tie into this proposed bike lane system on Trout Brook Drive, and the best way we saw fit to do that was to tie our side path into Skyview Drive, and that way bicyclists would have an easy residential road with low traffic volumes to ride down in order to tie into this bike lane system here. So as for entering the side path from the east leg of the intersection, bicyclists would be heading westbound on the north side of Route 44, or southbound on Starkle, and they would have two options to enter the side path. First, they would either just cross the intersection of Starkle and Route 44 and ramp up onto the side path, or they would just head southbound on Starkle and tie directly into the side path as shown in the animation. For exiting the side path on the east leg of the intersection, bicyclists would again have two options. They may continue westbound on the south side of Route 44, cross the intersection of Skyview and Route 44 and continue westbound, or they may just take a right either into the sidewalk or onto the road of Skyview Drive and connect into Trout Brook Drive that way. For the north leg of the intersection, the idea here was to tie into the proposed bike lane system on Route 218, that's represented by this blue dashed line. So the best way we saw fit to do that was to end our side path at the nearest driveway, and that way, when a new project comes through, they could easily end their bike lane or side path or whatever they decide to put in right at the other side of the driveway, so that way there's a seamless connection there between the two bike lane projects. So for entering the side path from the north leg of the intersection, bicyclists would be heading southbound, and they would either be coming from the shoulder or the sidewalk, and they would just simply ramp down into the side path as shown in the animation. For exiting the side path on the north leg of the intersection, bicyclists would similarly head northbound up the side path bike lane, and they would have two options. They may either ramp back into the shoulder or continue on the sidewalk. One thing to note here about the shoulder is 7 to 9 feet wide, which is pretty wide and enough for a bicycle to feel comfortable riding in the shoulder. And finally, for the south leg of the intersection, again, the original idea here was to tie into the bike lane system on North Main Street that starts at Haynes Road. However, again, we were unsure if we could do that, so we are proposing to tie our side path into the existing Sharrow system on North Main Street, represented by this yellow line. So the way we wanted to do that was by using bike ramps that ramp up and down from the side path. So for a bicyclist entering the side path from the north leg of the south leg of the intersection, they would simply just head up the Sharrow system, heading northbound, and ramp up into the side path, and then they would continue northbound towards the intersection. Similarly, bicyclists would, exiting the side path from the south leg of the intersection would just head southbound in the side path and then ramp down from the side path back into the share system in the roadway. There are lots of signs, 28 to be exact, that in their current locations conflict with the proposed 8-foot side path, so those signs will either need to be relocated or even removed, if possible, outside of the side path so that an 8-foot effective width can be maintained for bikes and pedestrians. We are working with our traffic design unit to achieve this and make sure that all the signs are relocated outside of the side path. And again, we are also even investigating if some signs are unnecessary and can be removed to avoid sign pollution at this intersection as well. We have other site objects that are also located within the proposed side path. These include lampposts and utility poles that will have to be relocated outside of the side path. We unfortunately have identified 20 trees that in their current locations conflict with the proposed side path and will unfortunately have to be removed just simply because there's no space to put them back in behind the back of the side path. However, we will have some opportunities to put trees back into the project, and I will go into that on the next few slides. So first, as I mentioned earlier, we are incorporating this big median here to the west of the intersection of Route 44 and Flag into the project. As you can see here in the existing photo, the median's pretty ugly. It's all bituminous or asphalt, so it blends in with the roadway. It's all cracked up. So we were going to incorporate this median into the project anyway, so we thought it was a good idea to also propose putting some trees or plantings into this median to green up the intersection a little bit. If we do propose trees in this median, it also adds a natural traffic calming effect, which is beneficial for pedestrian safety, which is always a good thing as well. We are also working with our landscape design unit to potentially upgrade the plantings in this median here on the west leg of the intersection as well. So this median will also be incorporated into the project. We have a big buffer space here on the west leg of the project as well, and we currently show it as grass in this graphic, but we are again working with our landscaping design unit to come up with some ideas to put plantings in this median. It's a pretty large space, and we think that it'd be a great opportunity to put some trees or other plantings in this area as well. And finally, we have some of these garden beds on all 4 corners of the intersection. These garden beds are actually partially located on state right-of-way and partially located on private property. We will be redoing the entirety of these beds as part of the project just to keep them consistent. We will obviously coordinate with all the right-of-way owners that will be impacted, property owners that will be impacted by us redoing their part of the bed, but we will be able to put some plantings within state right-of-way on these garden beds as well, which will also add some plantings and greenery to the intersection. For bus stops, there are 5 bus stops that are located just within or just outside the project limits, and we have worked with our transit unit to come up with some new proposed locations, which are shown as these new locations here. There are a few new bus facilities that our transit unit has proposed as well, and I'll get into those in a second, but I would just like to point out here that there is a new bus stop being proposed right in front of the Starbucks. So the facilities that I just mentioned are 2 bus shelters are being proposed along with a bench as seen here. For rights-of-way impacts, rights-of-way impacts on this project will be relatively minor. The rights-of-way impacts for this project are what we like to call sliver acquisitions, where just essentially a narrow strip of the property frontage or the front of the property will be acquired by the state so that state facilities can fit entirely within the state right-of-way. So just to go over a quick example of one of these sliver acquisitions on the project, this is actually the biggest sliver acquisition on the project. This is the Phillips 66 gas station property. As you can see here, just a narrow strip of the property's frontage is being acquired by the state. so that way the entire side path can fit within the state right-of-way. None of these sliver acquisitions will affect any vehicle's ability to get into a property or anything like that, so just keep that in mind. Another quick example of another sliver acquisition here on the mobile property. This one's even more minor. It's just a very slight acquisition of some of the existing right-of-way. And then a third and final example of a very, very minor sliver acquisition here on the Shell gas station property. And now I'll pass it over to Matt to talk a little bit more about the department's rights-of-way process.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Matt Giannakopoulos. I'm a project coordinator with the department's Division of Rights-of-Way. So as Nick just outlined, the proposed project design does have some right-of-way impacts, which is another way of saying that the proposed design would require the acquisition of property rights from some of the adjacent landowners. So I'm here tonight just to give a brief overview of the department's property right acquisition process. All property rights that are required for the project will be acquired in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes Sections 13A-73, 13A-98E, and whenever there is federal money used in any phase of a project, the department must adhere to the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Properties Acquisitions Policies Act of 1970. Okay. Once the design is further along and we know exactly the limits of any property rights that are needed for the projects, and we're ready to begin the acquisition process, each impacted landowner will receive a letter from our office along with a property map. Oh, I went too far. Along with a property map that depicts the exact rights to be acquired. At that point, our office ascertains the fair market value of those property rights, and we use that to establish an offer of just compensation. That offer gets sent out to the property owner in writing, and a right-of-way agent from our office is available to meet with the property owner and explain in detail the project, the impacts to that particular property, and explain how the department came up with that offer. The property owner would have a reasonable time to consider the offer and enter into any negotiations. Once an agreement is reached, the DOT prepares all the necessary paperwork to transfer those property rights to the department, and they'll file the deed and the property map on the town land records. If negotiations reach an impasse, in order to allow the project to move forward, the department may acquire the rights it needs through its power of eminent domain. And what happens in that event is the department files a notice in the local superior court along with a monetary deposit in the amount of that offer of just compensation. And the property owner would have 6 months from that date to file an appeal if they thought that the offer was inadequate. Whether or not the owner chooses to use their right to appeal, they can apply to the court to withdraw that money at any time. So I know a lot of times people hear eminent domain and they think the state can just take a whole property for $1 and things like that, but the owners would be entitled to at least that offer of just compensation, and the department would only take title to the property rights that it needs to allow the project to move forward. So that's my brief little overview. I'll be at my table answering any questions after the presentation. In the meantime, we'll give it back to Andrew to wrap up.
All right, thank you, Matt. So just want to give a quick summary as we wrap up this presentation. This project was initiated with the goal of improving pedestrian and intersection operations. We are removing the channelized right turn lane so that we can shorten those total pedestrian crossings from one side of the road to the other. We are also upgrading the signals at the intersection, both the traffic and the pedestrian signals. We're also incorporating some additional pedestrian safety features like the illuminated yield to pedestrian signage and the lead pedestrian intervals. That's all proposed work that we went over in our July 2023 public info meeting. And since then, we've gone back and we've added the 8-foot side path, which we think is a great alternative to be able to give bikes a dedicated space while organizing the mixed use on this side path. And just a big component of getting that side path to be able to fit in that existing sidewalk footprint was relocating and removing signage and other roadside objects. We also extended the project limits in order to provide all those logical ending points or tie-in points for that side path that Nick went over for each leg of the intersection. And this also provided more opportunities to convert empty space into landscaped areas. So from here, we go through our internal design approval process. That would be the February of 2025. We would then go to complete our design by the end of the following year and be out to construction in the spring of 2027. With these new improvements, our new estimated construction cost is $7.8 million. So that's the end of the presentation. From here, we do have a 2-week comment period. We invite you all to submit any comments or feedback by November 5th. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. The handouts we have the last page. You can write in comments, and you can either mail those in, or if you want to write them in tonight, we have a box in the back. You can drop them in. We also have a project email and phone number that we'll be monitoring throughout this comment period. And lastly, we just have our project website, which just contains this information. The handouts also have the site address on them with the QR code you can scan. That'll bring them right to that. I'll leave this up for a few more minutes. If you have any questions about that, please ask. We'll move to the Q&A portion now. We're actually going to go back to those stations we were at where you all showed up, and we're just going to spend the rest of the night speaking, answering any and all questions. So thank you.
Can I ask a question right now while you're up here? Just for everybody to hear, how common are those side paths? Are they used elsewhere in the state?
That's a good question. They exist elsewhere in the state. Maybe not delineated the way we're proposing. Typically, they're bi-directional, just multi-use. But in this case, we wanted to provide that dedicated bike space. But in Connecticut specifically, I don't know how often. This is the first we're designing.
Can I ask a question about the so-called dedicated bike space? So if I understand it correctly, a pedestrian who wants to cross the roadway has to first cross into what you just referred to as a dedicated bike space. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that space is available for a bicycle to go around the corner at speed?
Yeah, and we would be looking into certainly some type of signage. We've seen layouts before where pedestrians would need to cross a dedicated bike space, and there is some type of like painted crosswalk to kind of alert cyclists that this is a space where pedestrians would be crossing in order to get across the road.
And that's not something that you're going to look at it. I mean, you don't have any ideas yet?
Well, I mean, we'll look at the specific signage you would use for cyclists on the approach to those areas, as well as, like I said, we would put some type of crossing marking on the pavement to notify cyclists that pedestrians could be crossing.
Now, are you thinking just to warn the bicycle, the bicycle about the pedestrian, or you want to also have a way of warning the pedestrian about the bicycles?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. There could be signs for that, but again, we don't want to inundate with information. I think all the pavement markings and the being at the corner, crossing the intersection, I think all that together will kind of clue all parties involved that there's a conflict as they try to cross the road.
Do you see any ADA implications of that?
No, we're trying to avoid that altogether with the layouts. Nick kind of showed how those sidewalks would lay out. I mean, I think we'll be able to pretty easily establish all the facilities to be ADA compliant. So.
All right, I think we're going to break up and just go to stations now. And
yeah, so we
can just ask questions.
Question about the bikes. You talked about how many cars go through that intersection. How many bikes are coming through there?
So how many cars?
You said you told
bikes.
us how many cars. How many bikes are coming through the intersection?
We do not get counts for bikes. We don't get counts for bikes specifically.
Probably not a lot now, but maybe more once we make it more.
I'm kind of concerned concerned about the amount of space that you're dedicating to bicycles. Do we really need that in such a congested area?
Try, right?
Thanks. So we'll be here the rest of the night at various stations. Please come up, ask all your questions, and we'll answer them as best we can. Thank you.
Nice job.
Just have a quick question.
Yeah.
The width of the pedestrian sidewalks. Yes. Really, you showed your picture shows which people nicely walking.
So this is our minimum crossing. We have a lot of areas throughout where it's going to be wider than that. And when it widens up, we're keeping the bikes at 4 feet. And we give all the extra space to the bikes.
Can I push the bicyclists? No, teasing.
You're a jokester.
No, they're a pain in the ass, that's all. They want everything. They tell the pedestrians to stay home.
When